This is Tim Bryce with my column titled, When Tragedy Strikes. Whenever I lecture on Tim's senior moments, I remind the audience how lucky we have been to live in the times we did. Speaking as a baby boomer, I particularly rejoice in the music we experienced, not just the Beatles and the British invasion, but entertainers like Jimi Hendrix, who I had the pleasure of seeing in concert in 1968, and changed my perspective of rock and roll. I saw many concerts along the way, including Sinatra in 1984. There was just something extraordinary in our music, but I also appreciated much of the music from earlier in the 20th century, particularly jazz and big band. It was all so imaginative and amazing. We were also lucky to witness Apollo 11, where we put the first man on the moon, as well as many others thereafter. I saw a wonder horse in 1973 win the Kentucky Derby on his way to winning the Triple Crown of horse racing for the first time in 25 years, Secretariat. In baseball, I had the privilege of watching the emergence of the Big Red Machine, an unbelievably talented team, rock solid in every position, and the likes of which we'll never see again. There were other sports greats, such as Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Joe Namath, and Dick Butkus, who exhibited their greatness on and off the field. We also bore witness to the go-go years of the 1960s and 1970s, led by the greatest generation. This is when it seemed only the sky was the limit and computers began to transform offices. We didn't go out at lunchtime just to eat. Such meals were used to plot strategy, forge relationships, and make deals. And no, we were most definitely not politically correct by today's standards. It was fun, it was exhilarating, and I'm glad I didn't miss it. Such events shaped our character, and they represent the joys of life. Unfortunately, good times are accompanied by bad. As much as we like to remember the good old days, we also face considerable tragedy which shaped our perspective of life. In the lifetime of the boomers, we watched havoc strike us time and again, both man-made and natural disasters. For example, in terms of man-made disasters, in 1963 we witnessed the assassination of John F. Kennedy. This shocked the country considerably, both Democrats and Republicans. To this day, those that lived during this period remember where they were when they heard the news. Some say America was never the same again after this. We also saw assassination attempts on President Gerald Ford in 1975 and President Ronald Reagan in 1981. In 1967, the Apollo 1 fire claimed the lives of astronauts Virgil I. Gus Grissom, Edward H. White II, and Roger B. Chaffee. Despite testing and precautions, we were to lose more people along the way, such as the 1986 Challenger space shuttle disaster killing 7, and the 2003 Columbia space shuttle burning up in re-entry, also killing 7. In 1979, there was the Who concert disaster in Cincinnati, where 11 people were trampled to death due to festival seating. In 1983, there was the Beirut barracks bombings, resulting in the loss of 307 U.S. and French military personnel. In 1986, the Chernobyl disaster in Russia was a painful reminder of the dangers of nuclear energy. Others followed, such as the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan. In 1995, we had the Oklahoma City bombing, resulting in the loss of at least 168 lives. In 1999, there was a Columbine High School mass shooting in Littleton, Colorado, where 12 students and 1 teacher were killed. This was followed by over 30 copycat shootings plaguing the country to this day. In 2001, we had the 9/11 attacks representing the Pearl Harbor event of our generation and forced military action in the Middle East, where thousands of U.S. soldiers died or were maimed. Then there were serial killers who terrorized whole cities, much like Jack the Ripper did in London during the late 1880s. Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Richard Speck, Charles Manson, and David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. There are also wackos like Mark David Chapman, who gunned down legendary musician John Lennon in 1980. Then there's the matter of natural disasters. We've always had disasters caused by Mother Earth. For example, during our time we've witnessed, in 1964, the Alaska earthquake, registering at 9.2. It remains the most powerful earthquake recorded in North American history. Anchorage was particularly ravaged, and 131 people perished. In 1974, there was the super tornado outbreak, the most violent tornado outbreak ever recorded, with 30 F4, F5 tornadoes confirmed. Over 2 days, there were 148 tornadoes confirmed in 13 U.S. states and 1 Canadian province, Ontario. In particular, the city of Xenia, Ohio, was wiped out by the deadliest individual tornado on record. In 1980, there was the Mount St. Helens volcano eruption, which blew its stack in Washington state and covered the world with ash. In 1992, we had Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 storm which decimated southern Florida. In 2005, there was Hurricane Katrina, another Cat 5, which crippled Louisiana. In 2017, Hurricane Irma, yet another Cat 5, which pummeled Puerto Rico. We have also had our share of tornadoes. 1999 was the Oklahoma tornado outbreak, and 2011 was the super tornado outbreak. There were also numerous wildfires, earthquakes, tsunamis, and blizzards. As to the latter, I survived the great 1967 Chicago blizzard. People will talk about these natural phenomena for many years to come, and no, I do not blame it on climate change. We've been plagued by such natural disasters for as long as we've been a nation. For example, the bitter winter of 1777 to 1778 was so harsh at Valley Forge that more than 1,000 soldiers perished. What have we learned? These tragedies killed and injured thousands of people, left many homeless, took a toll on our mental well-being, cost billions, and was an insurance nightmare. In many cases, it took mere moments to wreak havoc and considerable time to repair. Whether it was a man-made or natural disaster, a lot of this could have been avoided had we performed better planning. For example, civil engineers long knew the weaknesses of the dikes and levees protecting New Orleans prior to Hurricane Katrina, yet politicians diverted money to other projects. Had the Secret Service insisted on affixing the roof of President Kennedy's limousine, we wouldn't have suffered such a traumatic event. Instead of planning and being proactive, Americans prefer to be reactive and allow havoc to strike as opposed to preventing it. There are many examples of this throughout our history, including Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and the Challenger disaster. We do not like to remember such tragedies, but such events also shape our character just as much as the joys of life, as it affects our senses of empathy, charity, our will to survive and overcome, and learn from our mistakes. To illustrate, it is impressive to see how Americans lend a generous hand to those maimed by disaster. As soon as a disaster hits, such as a major hurricane, we see Americans mobilize and come to their neighbors' aid in boats, bringing supplies, clearing debris, repairing homes, and much more. The only good thing you could say about how Americans react to tragedy is that it brings out the best in us. It is when we forget about these disasters that we court their repetition. Friends, keep the faith. This is Tim Bryce in Palm Harbor, Florida. Follow me on the internet at timbryce.com.